Hey, 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 here we are coming to you live from some undisclosed location in northern Ohio, somewhere near a lake. I don't know. We got a couple around here. And and tonight we're going to talk about the media and the roles they play as false prophets, and put a lot of biblical reference to it tonight. So, Dr. Ricks, if you'd start us out, we're ready to go.
From some secret location on the secret river in America. Here's a interesting one. Remember this. Every chicken comes from a broken home. This guy couldn't find any clothes to put on except underwear, but there was a bunch of paper around him, so he made a paper shirt and a paper pair of pants, and a paper hat, and he starts walking down the road in a little paper belt, and suddenly a policeman stops him. He says, "Officer, why did you stop me?" He says, "You're rustling."
Oh, wow.
Well, paper rustles. Okay. This is one that it's interesting. It's called the fridge funny. Some guy bought a new refrigerator, and it's hard to find a place to get rid of your old one these days. The city won't take it with the garbage, so he puts it out in the front yard with a big sign that says free for the taking. After over a week, he's worried about nobody has come by to get his refrigerator. So he says, "I'm going to put a sign on the refrigerator, and it's going to say, fridge for only $50. And would you believe, late that night, somebody stole it. I thought I would throw in two groaners. These are real groaners here. What does a tree do when it's ready to go home? It leaves. And here's another one. What do you call a slab of wood with nothing to do? Bored.
Bored. Wow.
Okay. Maybe we'll hold off the rest of those to later. Right now, we're going to look at, remember, one of the things that we speculated is that some of the functions in a society where people don't all believe in religion like they did anciently, and everybody doesn't go to church. In those days, they were very superstitious. They believed in, well, many false gods, and obviously some of the Israelites some of the time believed in the true God. So in a world where people don't go to church, a lot of our spiritual leadership comes from the media. So I want to say, what's the reaction of an angry false prophet in our media when things don't go their way? For instance, God told the Israelites not to get caught up in globalism, religion of all the nations around them. And that's what, of course, progressives are pushing, true globalism and earth worship, or they may call it global climate change, but same thing. And God, I believe, does not like what the media has been pushing. Let's pick up our first slide. And I'll tell you at least one of the reasons I think the media is mad at the way things have gone and and we'll get into how they're reacting to it.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. All right. All right, Deuteronomy 13:6. If your brother, the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. You shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall you eye pity him, your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him.
In other words, it was a death penalty in the theocracy of Israel if someone said, let's worship all the gods around us. And this whole chapter and the end of the chapter before it, God said, do not learn the ways of all the nations around you. Well, basically, the media is supporting globalism, and I think we mentioned that last week. And so when the traditional party with a really conservative platform won the election, even though they were trying everything they could to get the more globalist, liberal, earth worship type party to win, our media became angry, disappointed. They're very angry. And I thought about what happened to Elijah. Elijah had all the prophets of Baal, except Jezebel wouldn't let her group of false prophets go. Made me wonder if she didn't know something. But regardless, and at Mount Carmel, God brought down fire from heaven to show who was the true God and his prophet Elijah and all those 400 false prophets. Of course, it's very dramatic. That was the end of the false prophets. Well, so if Jezebel, as a leader of the false prophets, what was her response when on Mount Carmel they were proven to be frauds? Let's go to our second slide and see what her response was. And I'm not saying the parallel is perfect, but it still is in principle somewhat the same.
All right. 1 Kings 19:1. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow, about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there.
In other words, Jezebel sent her thugs out to assassinate Elijah. And I'm just thinking, do you see not that it's as rough as it was in those days, or as clear cut as it was in those days, but don't you see a pattern here?
Yeah, character assassination. They do everything. They send out their cronies, so to speak, and sometimes they don't get their own hands dirty, but they send others out to do it. They even hire people to start trouble. They'll do whatever they can. There are no rules, like you've discussed in the past. The rules for radicals. There are no rules. They fight dirty, and they'll do anything. And just like she sent her physical assassins, they send out character assassins to take down whoever they don't like.
And I realize this may be the most significant election in 30, 40, 50 years, and it's different than others. But I honestly have never seen, the media promised everybody. I remember 3 or 4 weeks ago listening to some newscasts, and I had a bad feeling about the newscast, but they were saying the Democrat is so far ahead in all the swing states. They even rattle off a few swing states like Pennsylvania. The more conservative candidate has no choice. He might as well drop out of the race. It is over. She was so far ahead. My point, and they said a lot of that. I've heard it many, many times. And they're embarrassed and angry that they were unable to swing public opinion. And I think they're mad.
Oh, that's for sure. They're mad, all right. And here's the funny part: was it New York Times said that they understand that they went too far and were a little biased. Little biased. That's funny about the election, and they said we're going to strive to do better. It only took them 2 days to write a scathing article about Trump. You know, someone did a search. I was watching or listening to a program earlier. And they did a search on, I think it was the Times or some news site, and they did a search. You can do a search word, and you can decide how far back you want to go. Anyway, they put in Trump. They found 16 articles that were current on this website, and they were all negative, every one of them. So you would think that 1 could maybe be neutral or positive. But no, all 16 were negative.
You know, I heard this just the other day, and it might have been CBS, but I don't remember. They said there was total chaos in Trump's transition team, and nothing was getting done. Then I saw Lou Dobbs show, and he had this chart showing the first 2 weeks about the last 8 or 9 presidencies and how many major appointments were made in those 2 weeks. Nobody had made any except Bush 41. He only had 2. Trump has made 5, more than anybody. I thought, wait a minute. The media is saying something that's now, granted, there may be internal rivalries for influence, you know, that sort of thing you have. But to say it's total confusion and nothing's getting done, and they've done more than twice what anybody else has done. Wait a minute. Does anybody see the similar problem here? The truth seems to have nothing to do with what they're saying.
Right, and that's another thing. if you believe one side or the other, if you were for Hillary or for Trump or for no one, you know, the never Trumpers, whatever, no matter who you were for or not for, if you are objective, at least objective, you know that the only thing Trump has done since he was a young man was put people into positions. That's all he does. He buys real estate and he tries to make it profitable enough, a little more profitable than he can do in a market, maybe shave 15 to 20% margin off the top. And that's all he does. So, and he's been doing it his whole life. So to assume he couldn't put a team together, you would have to assume that everything's been an accident his whole life.
The media, this far left media, is trying to defeat Donald Trump's administration by the power of suggestion already. They tried to elect Hillary by the power of suggestion. And they broadcast over the air, and it just occurs to me, remember who is the prince of the power of the air.
Yeah. It does fit our theory, though, of the false prophets in the media, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, it does perfectly.
There are some good journalists. Like I confronted a media person about media bias. He just got mad at me. Like, there's no such thing exists. I thought, give me a break. But there must be some good ones, just that you don't hear much about them or from them. And I think, well, let's discuss the mobs that are running the streets. I remember when the Ferguson thing, we were in St. Louis the night before the big Ferguson riot, and someone else's house, and all the stations, he was switching back and forth, all the stations he was listening to, and our brilliant politicians released the grand jury decision in the middle of the night too. That was really smart. But all the media basically had the same message. If you don't get an indictment, regardless of the facts, you should burn this town down. And I mean, that was the message, or you're justified if you want to burn the town down. I think, wow, is this crazy or what? And that happened. Don't you get the same feeling from the media now that if you don't like the election results, burn the town down?
Yep. Yep. The media's got no business doing any of that. Everybody's partial one way or the other, but it should not come through your reporting. You should, if you're a good journalist, you leave that at home. If you're a lousy journalist, you let it be known that that you have a bias. Now, most of the TV people watch, ever since cable started, most of the TV you watch that is news related is all opinion journalism, or I forget the name for it, but it's all driven by opinion, one way or the other. That's how they get you to watch. They get some conflict going. They got, remember when Hannity and Coleman's, one was on this side, one was on the other. They're there to be opinionated. That's why you're watching them. But when you just get straight news like a newspaper, that's not what you're supposed to get. You're supposed to get the news, not what you should think about the news. They don't necessarily tell you what they think. They tell you what you should think about the news. Once you figure that out, you see the news that you get in a whole different light.
And shouldn't the news be responsible? By being responsible, I mean, if you realize that in a society like ours, there are a lot of, like one guy was just joking about this young radical, and she might have been, socialist, radical, anarchist, Saul Alinsky, but she was saying, we got off the couch to come out here in the streets, and then whatever they're doing, burning and demonstrating and throwing rocks and store windows, whatever she was saying. And the one guy says, interesting, nobody said they left their job. They left their couch. It's almost as if we have a group of people who have nothing else to do but riot and loot, and at least some of them, that's fun. I'm not shocked about being able to steal, break windows, riot and loot, throw rocks at the police, especially for younger people. That wouldn't be fun for me, but for some people, that's fun. And all it takes is for the media to tell them it's justifiable. That is really bad behavior by the media. I mean, it's one thing the media say, we don't agree with the election results, we don't like this candidate, or we don't like some of his policies, but to then suggest to the and there are a lot of mob people out there who law and order is not their thing, and treating other people's property right is not their thing. Giving them the green light, a peaceful march is one thing. Rioting, looting, and burning is a whole other thing.
And society is partially at fault as far as years ago when you were a young man, you went out, you played cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, you played fake guns, you roughhoused and all that stuff. All that is being driven out of young males nowadays. That's not acceptable behavior anymore, especially to play with a gun. And when they get an outlet like this, instead of having that already flushed out of their system, for their younger years, whatever, now it's all there. And when they see any little thing to ignite it, it seems how it's acceptable to do that. It's acceptable to do all these things, breaking, damaging, hurting people, beating people, because they have a different opinion of you. That must be their outlet now, because they weren't allowed to do it their entire childhood. Now they're in their 20s and they're doing it. Because being a male is considered in bad form nowadays. You can't do that. And that it's not, our society is paying a price for that today.
What's driving these people? What's their goal? Normally, it's been over a week since the election. Normally, they would have tired out and went home.
Well, some of them are being paid some of them are being paid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to drive at. I think out there in those crowds of what some people are referring to as snowflakes. I think there's plants out there who are on salary that are they're trained. They know what to do to keep these people fired up in this effort.
It's like the communist revolution, a little bit different, but
There's a
in the early
definite
stages, Lenin and those guys who really wanted a violent revolution, they went among the army and the workers and other people in different cities in Russia, and the agitators helped stir up the mobs and kept going, because their goal was to overturn the government and create a worker socialist paradise, which turned out to be a nightmare. But I think these anarchists that are being paid by George Soros organizations, I think their goal is to bring the system down, but I don't know if they really know what's going to replace it, because they're demonstrating against democracy. There's one thing, if they could say, well, all those states that he won, they cheated to win them. He didn't win them. That'd be, at least that they, if they could ask for, check on the voter roll, see if they were whatever. But no, if you're demonstrating against an election, that's undemocratic. It almost sounds un-American and undemocratic and unpatriotic, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
If anything, the losing side, from what I heard one comment, they probably encouraged a lot of undocumented voters or illegal voters to vote. And they
I heard numbers. I can't remember what I heard. It was either 2 million or 20 million. I couldn't hear. I don't remember the number.
But they still lost anyway. So the ones. My point is, it's neological. I'm not even sure they know what they want, except the media wants to exercise their anger at the administration that won.
It had to be 2 million. They suspected 2 million fraudulent votes on the one side, and they still lost.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I heard the president on an interview basically tell the young lady, "Go ahead and tell your undocumented friends to vote. It's okay. We're not going to."
He straight up told her that. He straight up said that. He said it straight up.
And even
I can find the clip and play that, but that's what he said.
Even if they play word games with what he said, she knew what he meant.
Yes.
Yep.
She knew what he meant. Even if you play
actually, he did not. They didn't play any game. He straight up said, "If you vote, you will not be. You won't be persecuted. You won't be deported. You won't be anything. Your vote is sacred." Or that you will, it will not be touched. You will not be touched. That's what he told them.
Let's go to the next slide, because this is making the division in America worse.
Psalms 55:21. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords.
Somebody mentioned that some of the leading politicians right after the election, they said the kind of things you'd expect them to say, like give them a chance, whatever, in public. But probably behind the scenes, not that much behind the scenes, they and their allies in the media and the Saul Alinsky's are sending out the mobs to try and destroy. And or they call it public opinion warfare, if you like that terminology, right?
Right. And it seems to me that Van Jones ignited this with his white lash that night. He didn't help it any. And it was shortly after that all this started. And then neither Hillary nor Obama are going on TV and saying, you need to stop this. This is not right. They're not stopping it. They're not even trying to. The only one who did that was Trump. And he's not the one responsible for it.
And by the way, the president had an opportunity to try to stop it. They asked him about it, and he says, well, he was clever in what he said, so give him credit. He said, but I don't want to ask them to stop speaking out and silence their voices. Well, if you were a rioter, looter, anarchist, how would you take that statement?
Right. He He didn't come straight out and say stop rioting, don't hurt anything, don't be breaking properties. You know, he didn't do any of that.
He said, let your voices be heard. And then a lot of them, I think, riot because they get to steal stuff, at least in some riots.
Oh, yeah.
I went in Ferguson, they were taking these expensive wheel rims out of this one place. You could just see them, a TV camera right on them. You know, they weren't ashamed. They're just running out the door with stuff. So, and for them, it's fun and they get freebies. And by the way, it hurts the older people. I talked to one, well, actually two older people who lived in Ferguson afterwards. And they said, well, before the riots, there was a pharmacy we could walk to within a block or so. They didn't have cars to get our pharmacy. Same thing about groceries. Now we have to go a mile or two, I guess, on a bus or taxi to get stuff that we could just walk to before. It does hurt people. A lot of people think, oh, this stuff doesn't hurt anybody. I believe there's still parts of LA that have not economically fully recovered from the LA riots, even to this day. That's what I've heard.
Well, I remember, I think it was the Ferguson riots, Oprah interviewed one of the looters. And she said, she asked him, she said, this is supposed to be a protest over some things that were not right. But she said, how do you justify breaking into these stores and stealing things? Answer they gave her was, well, if I don't get it now, I never will. And of course, Oprah was smart enough to say, well, who said you're supposed to have it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody, I mean, everybody, there's stuff that you can't afford. You got to learn to live with it. By the way, who says we always get our way in every election?
No, I don't think any of us have gotten our way for a while.
I mean, like, you know, here's what I know everybody probably has heard this said on radio before, but these snowflakes, when they get to the real world, have a petty boss or whatever they have, do they really think the real world is going to give them everything they want? And if they don't get it, they get to sit in the corner and pout and loot and throw a hissy fit?
They're in for a shock.
And have somebody bring them cocoa.
And a therapy dog. I didn't get what I wanted.
I am so glad that I'm not in management anymore, that I don't have people working under me, because I wouldn't want to do it in this day and age.
Attitudes are going downhill. I hate to say it, but I see it. Anyway, I better not say too much. Attitudes are going downhill. What can I say?
And let me ask you a question here. I want to break just for a second, but I heard that Donald Trump appointed Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel today. Did you hear anything like that?
No, I didn't hear that.
I already had 5 appointments, but I haven't heard that name. I'm not aware of the 5. Oh, somebody else got an appointment. The Jeff Sessions, somebody said, did he really get Attorney General? And oh well, I don't remember. And then and there's one reporter said that is, Democrats are not going to go for that. They blocked him from getting that 30 years ago. This is like in your face, pointing to him. But I haven't heard about Huckabee. But
I don't think
Huckabee's a nice guy, isn't he?
Power to block, do they?
They can act ugly for a while. That's about as far as it goes.
They do that all the time.
They can hold it up for a while and act ugly, I think. Unless they can peel off a few Republicans. That's all. I think that's all they can do.
I see a headline online right now that might be interesting. It says Iraqis cheer the truth teller Trump hopes of crushing ISIS. So even the Iraqi people are glad that Trump was elected. That's kind of telling against our current administration.
Well, we'll see. You know, the future is very tricky. No one knows what to expect.
No, that's for sure.
Gary, would you like to tell that joke?
I certainly would. This joke is about the lawyer. He was talking to his client, and he said, well, he says, I have some bad news for you and some good news. He said, well, what's the bad news? Said your blood is all over the crime scene and the DNA test proved that you did it. Well, okay, what is the good news? Because your cholesterol level looks pretty good. Good cholesterol.
And that's the most important thing, right? You're eating too many fun foods.
Yeah. What do you call a sliced potato?
I don't know.
Chip.
Chip. Oh, that's a good one. Somebody here, I knew that joke. She just didn't answer it in time. Well, you know, with all the mess going on in the world, you got to laugh or you'll cry.
Yeah.
If you're a snowflake, you get to cry anyway.
Oh, and if you're a snowflake in some of these colleges, you get to cry all the time if you don't get your way.
Crying.
And these are, by the way, in some cases, they're men. I don't mean, and I mean this respectfully, little, small, delicate women. I mean men. You know, 220-pound men crying because they didn't get their way.
Just shows you that Miley Cyrus is a real trendsetter.
I know I shouldn't laugh at people's hysteria and tears, but it just seems outrageous. By the way, one of the things that I believe you'll see when you study the history of Israel, probably Jeremiah, but all the prophets, you'll see it. The false prophets kept telling the bad kings, keep on doing what you're doing, you know, keep worshiping all the gods of the nations around you, and you'll be blessed no matter what. And prophets like Jeremiah and many others would say, no, you better repent or else. And of course, eventually, disaster happened to Israel and the southern kingdom as well, because they didn't follow the true prophets, they followed the false prophets. Well, I believe that historically is true in a number of cases. Let's look at Matthew 23, because the false prophets in Christ's day were the scribes and Pharisees. And the Pharisees probably were the major ones of the bunch.
All right. Matthew 23:13. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel land and sea to win one proselyte, and when he is won, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves.
You know, and you might ask, how did they devour widows' houses? I think they had their version of the death tax. So these poor widows, you know, when the husband died, the estate had to be sold, and with the rules they had to give the money, a lot of it, since they ran, you know, at least the local government underneath the Roman Empire. So they ran the government, they got that money, and the poor widow, well, hopefully she had some kids or grandkids to take care of, otherwise she was out of luck. Well, actually that whole chapter and some other chapters, Christ calls these false prophets the blind leading the blind. And what happened to Israel is really interesting. Let's go to the next slide, and then I'll tell you what happened to Israel by following the leadership of the scribes and Pharisees, because I want to just show you the attitude and spirit they had. And when they got embarrassed by being wrong, how they responded.
All right, Mark 3:2. So they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had withered hands, step forward. Then he said to them,
you might interrupt you for just a second. Notice the Pharisees know, without a doubt, that Christ, and their other versions and other epistles to give more background, they knew he had the power to heal anytime he wanted to. That fact itself should have realize, wait a minute, this is the work of God. I want to show you how bad their attitude was. I'm going to make that point. And of course, what they're watching for is to see if he's going to break any of their, and I'm going to say this again, their Sabbath rules, not God's Sabbath rules, but their Sabbath rules.
You know, it also shows that their hatred was so intense that it clouded their judgment. I mean, if your hatred is so much for someone that you know they have a power like this and still you push against them, you're not thinking too clearly. All right, verse 4. Then he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out immediately and plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him.
You know, when you look at that verse, it's clear that he embarrassed them, because in the synagogue, they couldn't logically, biblically answer him. You know, they couldn't turn to scripture, you know, and they knew his logic was stronger, but they still didn't want him to heal that guy. And they were still so full of jealousy and hatred of Christ that, like you said, they couldn't see straight. So he embarrassed them. And what did those false prophets do when they were embarrassed? They plotted the murder. If you read some other of the Gospels, either the murder or destruction of Christ.
And you know what? I think everybody watching the program knows exactly what was going to happen the moment Trump was elected, that the media was going to turn on him like rabid dogs and not give him a minute's peace. And because they were that way to Bush, and he was somewhat of a liberal. Well, so is Trump too, but not nearly to that extent. But they're going to turn on him like rabid dogs, and they're not going to let up, and it's going to cloud their judgment. So we're not going to get anything out of them that we can rely on as far as media. You know what? Gary was right. I'm going to throw this up here real quick. Guess what? I'm going to call Tom, our honorary producer for tonight, sent this in. He sent this in. This comes from the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. So it's I always like to check my source as much as possible. Try to be careful with these headlines. There's a lot of false news out there, but Mike Huckabee is going to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel and will move the embassy to Jerusalem, according to the Telegraph, UK Telegraph.
Is that the
87 reports. Mike Huckabee says it's not true.
Other people say it's not true.
Really?
Some internet reports say it's not true, and some say it is. One thing about some internet stuff, I'm told there are false stories on the internet just to confuse us, and I don't really know what to make of it. Is it true or isn't it true?
Here's the problem. Internet sites, locations, whatever, they get paid by the click. So every time you click on it, it registers with their service. And so let's say Coke puts an ad on a web page, and that web page gets so many clicks. They can say, okay, Coke, we had 30,000 clicks. You owe us so much. Or they also use it to sell ads saying, hey, we get 2 million clicks a day. They don't care if the news is factual or not. They just want the clicks so they can sell the ads. They're as bad as the Pharisees and the Sadducees too, because it's phony. They just want the money.
It's all about money. That's also one of the accusations against false prophets. I didn't bring that scripture out, but a lot of it's done for what Christ says. They're not shepherds of the sheep. In his exact wording, but it basically means they're there for the money. But when there's danger, if it's not in their best money interest, they just run off and leave the sheep without the truth. And that is true of some of the media too. If it bleeds, it leads, whether it's good for the country or not. We'll have to find out. We'll watch this. I hope it is true about him.
Yeah, we'll have to watch. Keep an eye on this.
Is that the picture?
What's that?
we may have lost something there.
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out, but we're still on.
Okay. Well, my tablet, some of them say he got it and others say he doesn't have it. So now I'm confused. But it would be I think it would be a good thing if Huckabee got it, don't you?
Yeah, and if he moves it to Jerusalem, there might be some significance in that.
And he is, I'm almost certain he's a minister of the Baptist Church, Huckabee, or some similar church. So he does have a pro-Jerusalem perspective. He believes God will bless America if we are pro-Israel. I've heard him say that on this day.
This is dated today, so we'll have to give it a couple of days and see how it turns out. But it's some real interesting stuff, some real interesting appointments, and the media is going to react against every one of them as if it's the worst thing anyone could ever do. And I think they're gonna push this the idea, the narrative that Trump is stupid. I guess he just tripped over his billions. And that they're gonna keep pounding on him because that wasn't their boy.
Also, I heard the guy that he appointed for security. They say he's anti-Muslim. He got either fired or pushed out of the previous administration because he's against Islamic radicals and Muslims, and this is much too radical. The media is upset about that. So I see what you mean. No matter what happens, but if they move the embassy to Jerusalem, that is a big prophetic deal.
Yep. And
Arab countries have threatened America not to dare do that. And so I'm wondering, has anybody got enough courage to do that? With, all of our Islamic allies are going to throw a hissy fit if that's true.
Oh yeah. Well, when are they not throwing a hissy fit? That seems to be their natural state.
Well, one thing they can't do, they can't throw an oil embargo. America now has too much oil. I don't think they can embargo us like they could 20 years ago.
No, and you know what? If we go into I think we might be pushing more fracking and more ways to get oil out of the ground.
Yeah.
Pipelines will happen now. Different things will happen. Pipelines are safer than putting it across the land on a train.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that are going to happen that's been stalled. Radical socialists and liberals that want to punish this country or destroy our system want to step on our energy hose. If they can pinch our energy hose off with regulation and with government entities, if they can stop production of cheap energy, they can start to turn it, replace it with this green stuff that doesn't work. Then they can collapse the systems, and that's what they've been.
Let me ask you this: Trump, at least he implied he's for energy independence. Now I realize that's a complex issue, but is it possible they could bring coal mines back to some extent? A lot of places they've changed; you can't bring them back anymore. But there's still some electric plants that can still use coal. Is it possible the coal industry could be brought back?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Gary, do we still have your audio?
I don't think so.
Yep, we can hear you. You're good.
I can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, I was gone for a while there.
But all I'm saying is, where we live, Southern Illinois could use a boost in the coal industry. So could parts of Kentucky. And I believe certain parts of even Ohio and Pennsylvania could be boosted if the coal industry could get a shot in the arm.
Southwest Ohio,
Probably West Virginia.
Or Southeast Ohio. I'm sorry, Southeast Ohio. Yeah, if it comes back, I mean, there's all that potential out there, but we've stopped it. They even stopped drilling a lot in the offshore drilling. They stopped a lot of that. So
yeah, and it could mean lower electricity, which would be good for the economy. Because, businesses have to pay big electric rates. We lost aluminum foundry here, and I predicted it. I said they're going to, I don't want the details of regulations. We could have that almost the last aluminum foundry in America. It was right in the area I live in now. But electric rates and other regulations drove them out of business. It was tough and they should have left them alone. That's 800 jobs we desperately need in this area.
Yep.
I don't know if it's probably too late to bring that back. Some industries, once they're gone, it's hard to bring them back. But we'll see.
Well, if someone can find a way to make a profit from it, it'll come back.
Yeah, economics might bring it back.
Let's go to the next slide. Really nothing new on it, but I want to put it up there anyway.
Matthew 23:13.
The one after this one, the next one.
Oh, we already did this one, yeah. All right, Isaiah 56:10. His watchmen are blind, they are all ignorant. They're all dumb dogs, they cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. Yes, they are greedy dogs which never have enough. They are shepherds who cannot understand. They all look to their own way, every one of his own gain, for his own gain from his own territory.
See, one of what Isaiah is saying is, if you use a watchdog as an analogy for a true prophet or watchdog should bark at danger. Shouldn't the media be watchdogs? Isn't that their role in the government? I mean, a true independent media.
They used
they'll
to do
be
that.
watchdogs. They'll be watchdogs for the next 4 years.
Yeah, but only to one side, and that's
Right.
not well. And they're greedy for money, or whatever is most sensational, not the truth. The point is, but the real dangers they won't see because they'll be so busy being biased and blinded and greedy. Do you know what I'm saying? Real dangers they won't even notice.
Right.
And so they're not performing their job as true watchdogs. They're more lapdogs for one side and attack dogs on the other side, but they're not watchdogs. And an example of that historically could be the Pharisees eventually convinced the Jewish people in Christ's day, or after Christ was resurrected, of course, in Christ's day to rebel against the Roman Empire. We all know what a horrible disaster that was. If you read Josephus, if you just read Josephus, you will see that book behind me over here. It talks about the horrors of the siege of Jerusalem, and the Jews were scattered for like 19 centuries because of the bad advice from their false prophets. Another example in our day would be the false prophets in the West, mostly the American media, basically allowed the communists to win the war. We talked about that before, and over 4 million people in Cambodia and Vietnam were murdered by the communists. At least much of the blame has to go on our media.
Yep.
And, very few people know it. They don't want to talk about it, and they get mad when you bring it up, but they're not watching for danger like they should. And what we were saying, a true prophet should tell people they need to turn and repent. And I don't think our media sees any danger regarding decadence, destruction of the family, the government, wild, out of control spending. I mean, do they warn about anything that's worth warning about?
No, it's like their trumpets are silent to reality, to the real news.
Yeah, same thing about, we should be worried about our budget and saving jobs, and they're into a whole bunch of other stuff that they really don't need to be into. And I just think it's part of the problem. And let's go back to that, the next slide that we have.
Isaiah 5:20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who will put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter.
Isn't that what much of the media does? Sometimes they bury it inside entertainment too. But it's pretty much putting down traditional family values and playing up a lot of things that really aren't good for people. Or at least they're not balanced out the way they should be. And I guess we better get used to it, right?
Yeah, we better. You know, I was listening to one of the, listen to them debating something, and they were talking about all the news, and they said, well, you guys got Fox News and, this radio show and this. And they said, he said, yeah, but that's because they were saying there's no balance. Oh, you got Fox News, that's all they got. That's why they're doing so well. And the other news is spread out over 10 other sources: CBS, NBC, and ABC, CNN, MSNBC. I don't know. All theirs are all pointed in one direction. Fox News is pointed in another direction. And they were kind of complaining, look how popular they are. Well, you got 10 outlets. The people that want this opinion have one.
And they have better distribution. A lot of places you get CNN, like in airports and other places, you can't get. I've even been in 1 or 2 hotels. They tell you we will not allow Fox News in the common areas because the liberals around here complain about it. But they'll put CNN in the common areas. I'm not. If you have the right cable connection, you can get it. But they're, in other words, they're everywhere, and you got to have certain cable connections to get Fox. And it's usually way down the channel listing, much further, harder to find. So they get better ratings because they're everywhere, like you say. But no great surprise.
I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I was listening, and there's a guy I listened to, and he had a friend of his that lived in Chicago and was getting married, or was going to get married. Anyway, his wife was on the list to be brought in as she wanted to be a citizen. She wanted to become a citizen, and before the election, she was on the list, and the list was she wasn't due till next spring to come up to get her citizenship, to take the test and everything. Someone called her and said, we need you to come in. You got a window. And it was before the election, like a few weeks before the election, or a week, whatever. It says, if you get in here in this amount of time, we will rush you through and make you a citizen. And so the guy who was engaged to the girl or what have you asked somebody, because he knew somebody, why are you guys doing this? I mean, we were on the list till next spring. And he said, well, she's from, I forget what country, some country in South America. I forget where it was. I don't want to say and have it wrong. But it was some South American country. And we want to get, I think it was 100,000, as many that they could get that were on the list from that country in. And he said, why? Why that country? She said, well, they dug into it. In that country has a kind of a contract with CNN. They only let them in. They don't let other news sources into the country. They're everywhere. All the cable companies and everybody has a contract with CNN that's all the news this small country gets. And they all listen to CNN. They all thought Hillary was a saint. So they figured if they could get them to vote and get them in as citizens so they could vote, they would almost unanimously vote for Hillary.
That's cheating. I've heard that too. Several 100,000, maybe up to 800,000, were rushed into citizenship so they could register and vote. And they still lost the election anyway. That's a form of cheating. If you ask me.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's legal cheating. They should go by the regular. And by the way, they push it from countries that have a socialistic past. People are used to socialism, and so they will naturally vote for the more socialistic party when they get here. Probably 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. So it's like buying votes, right?
Yep.
That's the whole reason for amnesty. I suppose they'd argue for other reasons too, but that's pretty much it. Um, anyway, that's how things go. I mentioned in the article about the abortion story 2 years ago. There was a bill in front of Congress to outlaw abortions based on gender or race, where you couldn't say, for instance, what's the gender of the baby before I decide whether to abort it or not? Because, in Asia, that's become a crisis, because if it's a girl, they're more likely to abort it. So the natural balance between boys and girls has been thrown off by large numbers. Well, that's starting to happen to America. So let's make a law against it. You can't ask that question, the race of the baby or the gender, before you decide to abort it. Well, the liberals want no restrictions on abortion, no way, shape, or form. Let's get rid of those babies any way we can, last second, anything, nothing. So the Liberal Party blocked that. The media kept that story spiked. So unless you listen to certain Christian stations, and they don't have that wide distribution, very few people even knew about it. Why did the media block that story? Because they knew if the public heard that, they might have a hard time blocking that bill. That's what I mean by the media is leading us in the wrong direction.
Yeah, the night that Hillary lost, one of the women, or the day after, said, "You better, if you got," you said, "You better hurry up and have your abortions now before Trump gets in office." That was the most important thing that came to her mind. That you better have your abortion now. That's it. That's our media.
What's amazing is they say if you ask one of these men, why don't you have the baby adopted if you can't afford it? They don't like that at all. And you think, well, a choice between adoption and murdering the baby, that adoption doesn't look so bad by that choice. But apparently that's not how American young women are taught to think. Adoption, bad.
You know what? And years ago they used to try and hold to this thing. Well, it's not really a human, or it's not really a person. And they're kind of even abandoned that. They don't even care. They at least had the pretense that they had a leg to stand on. No, they don't even care about that.
They know the fetus can feel pain. Let's go to our last verses, and I guess it's time to shut down, right?
Yeah. It's getting there. All right. 2 Chronicles, 18:22. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you.
Now, we know that happened to Israel and Judah. My point is, our false prophets are embarrassed how wrong they were in more ways than one. And now, in their anger, they're stirring up the mobs and they're going to strike back. That does not bode well for America.
Not at all. And it's interesting that false prophets and Pharisees is what comes up when you're trying to get a look at the current media we have. It's just it's too rich. That's what comes to mind, and that's what fits.
One thing that I want to mention, next week we're going to talk about Corinthians and baptism for the dead. One of those really tricky scriptures, baptism for the dead. But also, I want just people to think about this. We're going to mention it for a minute or two. We talked about last week that 6 minutes that turned the stock market around, where everybody, because they had political alliances with Hillary, and I think she had some secret deals with some Wall Street banks, and they don't like being surprised. The market started low, but then they thought about it and realized, wait a minute. The current administration has pro-business, pro-organic growth doctrine. Now, whether they're able to pull that all off or not, we'll see. And the stock market said, wow, they got exuberantly positive, and we've had 2 weeks. Well, the Wednesday after the election, maybe that was 2/3 of the week, but we've had almost 2 weeks and the stock market has reached super highs and is holding those highs. Now that means the futures market, they really believe we're headed for prosperity in the future. And I just wonder, is that true? Give us something to think about. And if it is true, what does that mean for us spiritually? Do we have more time to do God's work, or what does it mean?
I think it could go either way. I mean, obviously, I mean, that's kind of a weaselly way out of it, but I mean, a stronger leader in this country could provoke the world that's been trying to create their kind of global union that they're trying to put together, especially in Europe. It's going to upset them. It could cause them to do things they wouldn't have done. Instead of a slow slide into this global socialism, it may speed things up. It may not. It may pause it for 4 years or 8 years, whatever.
It might force the issue and make it go faster. That's very possible. So a lot of people say, pray for America, pray for the incoming administration, because there are a lot of problems out there that could torpedo that prosperous anticipation that people think, at least the investing market thinks we have. Pray for America. I said that's the best thing. And whatever is God's will, and pray for God's church in the context. And pray for the next administration, they pick the right people. And I think it'd be wonderful if Huckabee is ambassador to Israel, don't you?
I think it's the ideal choice. I got one more question. Did you hear? I heard that Jesse Jackson has asked or suggested that Obama should issue a pardon for Hillary.
That
a bunch of people have suggested a pardon for Hillary.
Well, doesn't that mean that he thinks she's guilty of something?
Yeah, they know
that is an interesting thought.
They know she's guilty, but the only problem is if he starts pardoning her, he's got to pardon her husband. He's got to pardon the AG.
Nobody will admit that she's guilty. But did Jesse screw up there? Did he say something out of line and let it out that he believes she's guilty? He must have.
Well, I suppose they should. I guess it would be the right thing to do to pardon her, right?
Why?
I don't know. Just for Obama to seem like he's being big-hearted, or I don't know. And maybe, they say when presidents are going out, they pardon a whole bunch of people. Didn't Clinton pardon some major criminal?
Yeah.
His very last day in office? Mark Rich, okay.
He also Clinton also pardoned a bunch of people, a bunch of terrorists that from New York.
Yeah, why did he do that?
But even for crimes against the country?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Well, it leaves very little time for the press to criticize. I don't really know what's best for America at this point. I can see being magnanimous and pardoning them, but of course it would be nice if they said they were sorry.
I think they need to go to jail.
These kind of people don't say they're sorry. They don't say they're sorry. They don't apologize. Unless it gets them somewhere, unless they can get them, they get something out of it, they'll apologize. But other than that, they don't do it.
Well, all I can say is the future should be interesting. I think we have an alpha male leader, like you say, Ken, and it's going to change the whole nature of things. Whether it all works out for the good or not, no one really knows for sure. We'll have to wait and see whether the prosperity the investors think we're going to find in another year or two comes true or not. We'll have to wait and see. But I do feel a little more optimistic, but you never know. It's hard to predict the future, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? I remember when Clinton was in office, there was a lot of tension when he went out of office, and when Bush got in, regardless of what you thought of him, there was a sense of an easement. You know, people kind of exhaled a little bit, I think, when he got in, and thought things might calm down and smooth up for a while. And it hadn't been for 9/11, they would have. But yeah, who knows? Gary,
I think the most profound thing that we heard today out of the news, if it's true, is Huckabee's statement that he would move the American embassy to Jerusalem.
Boy, that is going to really upset our so-called Islamic allies in the Middle East. They say that they have another name for Jerusalem, but I forgot. I can't pronounce it. But that's the capital of the Islamic Caliphate empire that should exist.
They say they will never tolerate that.
Yeah, it's big.
What do they tolerate now? They don't tolerate anything now.
And
It's
almost
pathetic.
every country has an embassy in Tel Aviv, I believe, but not in Jerusalem. So we will see how that works out. I hope it's true too. And I hope America will give more support to Israel than we have in recent past. Although I guess our country's been schizophrenic. In a lot of ways, we've been pro-Palestinians, but we still have some military cooperation with Israel. So it's a little bit of both that's still left over. But I hope we get more. I think, don't you believe God will bless us if this country is more pro-Israel?
Yes, I would want to believe that. In the past, we have had some cooperation with Israel in the last 8 years, but the tone that was set by Barack Obama was very ugly.
Yeah, when you make the prime minister of Israel leave out the back door, that sends a message.
With the trash cans. Can. That's what I read. I thought, well, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Oh well, we will see.
I hope we reestablish very good relations with Israel, and because they're our brother.
The one thing that's true, the Jewish people have had more cooperation and success in America and Britain than any other part of the world in their entire history. And I believe that's not purely coincidental.
No. All right. Have we got anything else we want to cover before we let them go? Nope. All right. That being said, I'm going to say good night, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Sabbath. And we'll see you up north tomorrow. And we'll see you all again here next week. So everybody have a good night. And there it is. Everybody have a good night. And like I said, we'll see you all again next time.
Good night, Ken.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.